Welcome to Kellogg's Global Politics. I'm Anita, and I'm here with my co-host Ryan.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Yesterday, the U.S. announced that it had captured Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro, who, along with his wife, arrived in New York a few hours later to be tried on drug trafficking charges. Then, President Trump said that the U.S. would be running Venezuela in the near term. So what does this all mean? We cover the latest on the stunning development and what is likely to happen over the next few days and weeks. So I was wrong.
Yes, you were.
Again, no one should ever take prediction advice from me. I'm notoriously bad at it, but I didn't think that there would be a U.S. ground operation in any way in Venezuela, and I turned out, I mean, I did give it like a 40 to 50% chance it could happen, but go back and listen to the episode. You always give me that look.
Yeah. So I can't remember the condition, but you were highly skeptical of the idea of a special forces operation taking out. That's kind of what I envisioned was him just being killed. I did not envision him being arrested.
At least I was right about that. You can't just go around killing leaders of other countries.
I think it's because he did willingly surrender at the end of the day, apparently while getting into a safe room.
Well, he didn't get in there.
Yeah, he was trying to get into a safe room. Not that would have helped based on the account by Raising Cane. Yeah, that's his nickname, the general of the press conference that was given by Trump and the cabinet members. I thought General Raising Cane's detail was by far the most informative and definitely kind of the most vivid in terms of the picture and details of the military operation, which itself was stunning, in terms of its complexity and its success to carry out that with only, it sounded like maybe a handful of U.S. injuries, but no casualties. And to have a operation that successful that you can go into another nation's capital, go to the presidential palace, neutralize a significant number of security that would have been in place, and then successfully bring back said president and the first lady onto a military vessel for prosecution in New York.
Yeah, I think it's making other countries in Latin America pretty nervous that the U.S. could just go and do this successfully. And the question of how restrained Trump feels like in dealing with other countries. I mean, we both have talked about how Cuba is probably next on the list. If you do the same thing in Cuba, I think countries start to be, is the U.S. just going to take out leaders that it doesn't like?
Yeah, which would be a throwback to the 1960s and 70s.
Well, we did it more subtly.
We did it via proxies, and it was more the CIA. But I do find it interesting that, the CIA was given kind of free rein beginning last summer. Mm-hmm. And it seems like, it was hard to tell from the details of the press conference, because my first thought was like, well, they must have encountered no resistance. This went so smoothly. But no, it seemed like they encountered significant resistance. They knocked out quite a few both communication networks, I think electrical networks, the air-to-surface missiles, in order to allow the Chinooks, which had the special forces, the Delta Force, to fly inland far enough without any issues. So that part didn't kind of it seemed like there was resistance, but it was neutralized pretty effectively.
It was a very impressive military operation, no doubt.
Yeah. No, I think it's up there with what Israel pulled off against Iran and Hezbollah last year in terms of the complexity and amount of coordination.
One thing that really surprised me even more than this operation is listening to Trump's press conference when he said that we are going to be running Venezuela in the near term.
Yeah, it was surprising, but it was sort of like when he first said it, it was like, okay, this is just Trump. Trump's like going off. He's doing the weave. Because he was weaving in all sorts of BS. He's talking about crime stats in New Orleans. D.C. has no crime now, which we appreciate. We live here. There's apparently no crime anymore. But in that, but he kept repeating this idea that we were going to run the country, which really runs counter to what we thought MAGA was kind of all about ending all sort of foreign interventions and nation building and all that stuff.
So I think everybody was taken aback by that and has been speculating on what that actually means. And what it seems to mean is different things to different people. So Marco Rubio, one of the people who's supposed to be running the nation, said on talk shows this morning that he's not directly running the country, but using the leverage of the oil blockade to get Venezuela to do what the U.S. wants, which is pretty big difference from what Trump said.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to be more in line with, the sort of footprint that they want to put down. So yeah, one of the interesting things that Trump, in terms of like talking about who the U.S. would work with as a proxy, one of the people that he immediately ruled out was Maria Machado, who was the Nobel Prize winner and Democratic leader in exile for Venezuela. There was no mentioning of the actual proxy for her political party that won the election in 2024, the one that Maduro kind of blatantly ignored the results and stole the election, Edmundo Gonzalez. There's no mentioning of him. Now, they did mention the vice president, who under the current Venezuelan constitution is currently in power. And I know, when this operation first happened, there were some rumors that she had fled to Russia, but that's not the case. She did appear on television that day. And today, because we're recording this on Sunday, January 4th, has been very defiant of the U.S. Now, during the press conference yesterday, Trump said, Rubio had this conversation with Delcy Rodriguez, who is Maduro's vice president, and said they were working out kind of an arrangement. So it was left very much kind of like open who the U.S. would potentially work with. But the main message was that Trump gave at the time was that, we're going to run this until a certain transition occurs.
Very vague.
Very vague.
This really contrasts to Noriega, who the administration keeps saying, we did this invasion to get Noriega on drug charges. This is just the same thing. But what is interesting there is the elected leader who had lost to Noriega, or hadn't really lost, but was sort of this situation, won, but Noriega didn't acknowledge it, was installed by pretty much right afterwards. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. supported the person who'd won the Democratic election and installed him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas we are not supporting the person who won the Democratic election.
Because we also don't have physical control like we did with Panama. I mean, this was an invasion of, I think, like 10,000 troops that surrounded the presidential palace for Noriega. And it was a siege of, they're blasting music and kind of harassing him, and eventually he gave up. But yeah, there was physical control. The country's 3 million total population versus Venezuela, which is 30 million, so 10 times bigger.
But also, we could at least say we support the rightful president of Venezuela.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you would expect. But it was interesting the way Trump phrased it around Machado, basically saying she was not popular enough.
Right.
Even she didn't have the political will to.
This candidate, Gonzalez, won 70% of the vote.
Yeah, who was never mentioned. I mean, It was just Machado was mentioned. Gonzalez was never mentioned at all. Rubio didn't really mention it. Yeah, so it does seem odd. You've had this stolen election, which he should appreciate. Obviously, the 2020 election was stolen, so Trump should sympathize. But he's not mentioned in here as part of this transition plan. We're part of the demands that the U.S. expects him to put in place. So this kind of brings on the thought of, well, given the second part of in terms of what was emphasized during the news conference, which is around the oil and around all the money that was going to be made by U.S. oil companies that in turn was going to go back to the Venezuelan people. But the oil companies really would be the ones paying for all this additional infrastructure and rebuilding of Venezuela. So that was emphasized over and over again. So it makes you think that it doesn't really matter who the leader is as long as they have control on the security apparatus of the country and are willing to cut deals that are very favorable to U.S. oil companies, essentially.
So the conclusion would be by many that this is all about oil. It's not about drug trafficking. It's about U.S. oil interests and sort of all the things they accused us of in Iraq, which was probably not true, certainly seems to be largely true in the Venezuelan case.
Yeah, it definitely appears that way. I mean, I think the things...
I mean, there's Rubio's project.
I think Rubio's project is a big one. And I think the fact that true hardcore socialist leaders in South America, it was really only Chavez and then Maduro and then the communist regime in Cuba. People point to Brazil, but that's a standard left-to-center government by European standards.
Trump had some negative words about Colombia's president as well.
He has, yeah. I mean, that was the other interesting thing to emerge. I mean, Cuba definitely is next on the list. And he even gave Rubio extra time to talk about it, which my comment to you is this is like Christmas Day for Rubio, because this is like all my dreams are coming true. I'm gonna do what JFK and every president since then has been unable to do. I'm gonna overthrow the communist regime in Cuba and retake it.
He kind of echoed those sentiments on the morning talk shows as well, Rubio, in that Cuba should be very afraid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's the reason for the targets. The other interesting, this is the dog that did not bark. They were smart enough not to let Stephen Miller talk, because anytime he's kind of, they take the leash off and he's allowed to go on any of the major networks, he usually embarrasses himself because he's a very angry little man. And but he was there. Mm-hmm. He was there of a very select elite group. So this is also about immigration and about sending back Venezuelans to their country. But it was just interesting that he was kind of there as kind of that third wheel. And, Trump would allude to it, mostly talking about like, they maybe want to go back and invest. And I'm sure he's even talking about people who are American citizens but are Venezuelan descent. But yeah, I just thought it was, Miller's there for that. The other purpose is the cleansing of America, let's say.
Absolutely.
So going back to the oil aspect, I did a little bit of digging, and I would say everything, because the other question is, okay, well, this is being left up to the U.S. oil companies, and it's primarily Chevron and Exxon that have had like a history within the country, of which Chevron's had the longest history. It's been there continuously since 1923. It was one of the only foreign companies to stay, or Western oil operators to stay within the country after Chavez nationalized the remaining kind of oil assets. But they stuck around and have been investing in 5 different onshore and offshore fields during that time. What I'm always frustrated with is Venezuela is always shown as like, okay, the reserves here are amazing. The reserves technically are like 300 billion barrels, which is more than Saudi Arabia and much greater than the U.S. But what nobody ever factors in is like, well, how, one, what's the technical recoverability using current technology? Can you actually recover that oil? And then 2, can you do it economically? And that's the real problem. How much of this is actually attractive to investors or to U.S. oil companies? So there's one quote that came from the Washington Post from an energy analyst firm that said it would take, because right now, the oil production in Venezuela has decreased from like 2-3 million barrels a day, which was, it kind of peaked during the early part of Chavez's period, and has since gone into collapse. So it's about at 900,000 barrels a day. It's actually bounced up a little bit over the past couple of years because they've Chevron's invested more. I think the Chinese have also invested more, but the cost just to get 500,000 more. So let's say going from 900,000 to 1.4 million would take $10 billion and 2 years in order to accomplish, which I was a little surprised, one, the cost of it, and then two, the amount of time. But everything else that I'm reading is that the infrastructure, this isn't like going into even like a Mexico or, like a U.S. operation where they just haven't invested in it. It's just no maintenance, very poor infrastructure, a lot of things that would have to be invested in upfront beyond the wells themselves to get them back on production. So that upfront cost, looking at it and doing like a back of an envelope calculation, not that attractive, especially at these prices.
So I was reading, because it's heavier crude oil, it costs more to extract. Yep. And so the estimate is that it has to be above $50 per barrel for it to be economical to get this Venezuelan oil. And since prices are at 50, possibly going lower, then it's difficult to make a profit with these Venezuelan extraction.
Yeah. So it's very little incentive compared to the alternatives that like a Chevron or Exxon would have for deploying its global capital. Yeah, this heavy crude at these prices, just not attractive. Even the low-hanging fruit, which this would be, this first tranche, let alone getting above, it's just not attractive. So if everything is hinging on U.S. oil companies coming in, the only other way, because when I was doing my back of envelope calculation, I was using a standard kind of international royalty where they, upfront the Venezuelan government would get a 25% royalty. And then there would be some sort of cost recovery and then production sharing, like profit sharing after that. So even with that, I was coming at $60. It was fairly marginal. So everything hinges on this, the entire, I guess, leverage and rebuilding of Venezuela, and it's not attractive. What is Trump going to do to provide that incentive then to Chevron and Exxon to actually want to invest in Venezuela? Are we going to subsidize them to go in? But it's not going to cost anything. That was the other thing Trump said.
None of this is going to cost anything because we're going to get these tremendous royalties from oil.
So the only thought is that whatever these terms, they're unprecedented within like international markets dealing with a national state oil company. So you have to find a partner who's willing to sell the resources of the nation at an extraordinarily low price for development or some sort of thing. I mean, they were talking about, because we talked in the last episode, which we'll release like right before this one. We talked about because Trump goes on and on about what was stolen from Chevron historically and from Shell. And that amounts to like $10 billion, probably in like 2015 dollars.
Didn't he say like 60 billion or something? I thought he gave a number that was much higher. Yeah, well, I'm sure in his mind it's much higher. But in terms of what was ruled in international courts, what Venezuela settled on, and what they were still actively making payments on, it was $10 billion. I guess if you include like damages and who knows what other things he would factor in, maybe you get to that 60 billion, which is already pretty excessive compared to what was taken. I guess you could do lost production, lost sales, and then the time value of that. I don't know. So maybe there's some sort of cost damages recovery period that helps speed up the investment. But it's definitely not a slam dunk by any means, just from a pure economics point of view, is what I'm trying to say with this oil play. Absolutely. And that's a problem for Venezuela, whose entire economy hinges around oil. And it's always then struggled, had problems previously with inflation. And this kind of led to Chavez winning in the first place, because every time oil prices went low, the economy was very badly hurt. So without high oil prices, it's hard to see how you're going to have this economic boom in Venezuela, especially since we're obviously taking high royalties.
Right. And then there's I guess going back, who do you envision as the partner that's going to be willing to take whatever this deal is to, what will be criticized as selling your country kind of into neocolonialism?
I don't know. Exxon?
No, I know. Oh. No, the oil. I don't know what you're talking. Well, one, I will say to defend the oil companies, they've been trying to get away from these practices.
But Exxon seems to be the most evil one. Chevron's up there.
This was like 2 generations ago. Same. Most of your textbook studies of how these companies operated.
I mean, Chevron did some really bad things in Latin America. That's for sure.
Yeah, historically, yeah. I'm not as familiar with that. I'm more familiar with Shell in Africa, but I will say the companies have gone to great lengths to try to clean up those sort of reputations and in their interactions with the government and with the local communities. It's not perfect by any means, and they normally go with maybe slightly above what's required by the local laws. But still, to go into this, which feels like a very, it's a neo-colonial sort of arrangement, particularly if it goes well above beyond kind of what's normal for royalties under a joint venture like this.
So do you mean what political partner in Venezuela?
Yeah, what political partner within Venezuela? Because obviously we're seeing the resistance from the vice president today. I mean, is it going to be a general? Because the generals hold quite a few power. And it was kind of interesting. I was listening today to a podcast that talked about, the number of generals, because there's quite a bit more compared to like the U.S. military, despite excess complaints that we have too many generals. But and all of these generals have business interest, within various sectors. Basically, everyone within the military, probably like 90% of the economy, kind of flows through the military in some form. So you're going to have to get somebody that's going to essentially agree to maintaining that, because nobody's going to agree to losing a significant part of their pie.
I mean, as for a general, I mean, certainly part of the government, the military part of the government, the defense minister has been very, very non-cooperative. And he's had this stronger language than the vice president about not cooperating with the United States. As a political leader, I think the problem is nationalism sells more than saying, oh, we're going to give the U.S. part of our oil wealth. So I mean, personally, I think this is why the U.S., Trump in particular, is afraid to work with the democratically elected leaders, because he feels like that they may be more reluctant to make sweetheart deals for U.S. companies in Venezuela, and that he might have more leverage over the current government. I think that's at least his hope.
Yeah, it does seem like there's much more opportunity for, personalized deals, corruption, dealing in crypto, all that sort of stuff, if you're dealing with an autocratic military regime, which, honestly, historically, that's been the U.S.'s reputation within Latin America during the Cold War, is to put in a right-wing military dictator that's compliant, no, not puppet per se, but compliant.
Compliant.
Yeah.
Who usually did horrible things to their own people, and in lieu of having a democratic government, which people had elected, but more on the socialist side. It's not a very good history. Latin Americanists hate the United States because of everything the U.S. did. You can't even hardly say anything positive about the U.S. in that group, at least has been my experience in dealing with Latin American scholars. But I think, to me personally, it's just really problematic that we're not supporting the Democrat leaders of Venezuela. Oh, and the other thing, if we're not going to support the Gonzalez, who was elected in 2024, then we should at least be calling for an election within 30 days, as in the Constitution of Venezuela says. That should be the minimum, we're doing in support of democracy. Like, we're taking out these, we're saying how bad Maduro is, we're saying how bad Cuba is, and presumably these are mostly because they are not democratic countries. I mean, that's part of our argument, at least. And yet we're not doing everything to bring democracy to Venezuela or encourage its democratic past.
Yeah. Which, again, Trump's not big on promoting the democracy
But if we're going to take out a leader, then we should be promoting.
Yeah. And I think what they're looking for I mean, he did give at least lip service to the idea of, and it was a very nation building sort of thing. It was like, it would make no sense for us to take out Maduro and then just leave it to a very similar regime, in terms of, and he would provide, wanting to make Venezuela great again and provide kind of these benefits. And that was the whole idea. The oil companies are going to come in, they're going to invest lots of money, that's going to make more oil, that's going to increase the national revenue, everybody will be better off because of it. But yeah, you're just not, you're not really seeing kind of that path, how they would get there exactly, or how that translates into the partner that the U.S. is envisioning, if it's not a democratic partner.
So this is what we talked a lot about since then, but I think it's, the comments by Rubio were also very informative this morning. I mean, what do we think the U.S. is doing? What does it mean to say that we're running Venezuela, or if we're not running the day-to-day operations, as Rubio made clear this morning, which was confusing at first, what are we doing? What exactly do we want from the Venezuelan government? And if the authoritarians give it to us, Maduro's successor, are we content with that, to having just the successor of Maduro remain in power?
Yeah, and it's not clear because, I mean, supposedly Maduro was offering very favorable terms in terms of oil concessions. So it seems like it is beyond just having a grab on the oil, although that's an important component, but it doesn't seem to be enough. So it does feel like also this war against socialist as well, which I think is the Rubio part within it. So I don't think we can look at this as strictly a klepto. It has to be a true change within the regime and the death of Chavista, of the
Trump
Chavez system.
Talked about the vice president pretty favorably yesterday.
Well,
I mean, he
didn't knock her, but he also he deferred to Rubio on it as well.
But he had some positive things to say, that he thought that basically they were going to be willing to work with the U.S. to give the U.S. with what it wants. And
which wasn't completely clear beyond what, above and beyond what Maduro was offering, is the U.S. want.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is exactly the question. What do we want? What does the government of Venezuela have to do to stay in power? I mean, he certainly threatened a second strike, and it seems to me that's part of the leverage over the current government to give us what we want or we'll take you out.
Yeah.
But nothing in what he said, oh, we're going to encourage democracy.
No, there's nothing in there because no elections are mentioned. And again, he dismissed the one, one didn't mention the actual president-elect, and then, dismissed Machado completely.
Yeah, so I think that's a problem. I think the other question that comes to my mind is Trump in love with military adventurism now? I mean, here's somebody who, one of the things that surprised me about Venezuela was that in his first term, Trump seemed very unwilling to get the military too involved in anything, right? He wanted to keep us out of conflicts as much as possible. And I think I expected that to continue. And I think to some extent, you keep having like the success of Iran and now Venezuela is making him think a lot more positively about military action. And even in his mind, regime change or nation building, like running a country. I'm not sure when he said run the country, he was thinking in the same terms Rubio said. I mean, I think he actually meant something more dramatic, that we would be running more the day-to-day operations, where I think Rubio this morning was quick to kind of dial that back. I don't think there's reason to believe that Rubio and Hegseth had not heard that they were in charge of running Venezuela before Trump had actually announced that. But I think there's a danger, especially when we're talking about Cuba being next, that Trump sees the success of the military and decides that maybe he does want to get more involved in regime change and nation building?
I think he has no interest in the actual hard work and detail of nation building.
He doesn't have to do that. He has people who work for him to do that.
Well, as long as it doesn't involve a significant number of troops and U.S. presence on the ground for long terms period. I think what he likes, and all of his military interventions have been like this, it's the use of special forces, or, in the case of Iran, a quick bombing campaign that are very quick, minimum exposure, to the loss of life, and then they're one and done sort of deals. We saw that with like Soleimani as well, with that strike. But any commitment beyond that, I don't see any appetite for. He's able to get away with this because this is like a movie playing out. I mean, he even mentioned it. When he comes in, he's like, I saw things, in this operation. It was like watching a TV show. It was amazing. You guys will never get to see it, but it was amazing. And again, this guy, he's reality TV. He views things, through that lens. And if he has this tool, which, to be fair, this has been a tool that U.S. presidents have increasingly relied on, this idea of using the Navy SEALs and Delta Force, these special ops, for these attacks. And they're being used. I mean, these are the most televised ones. Mm-hmm. These forces get used all the time. Because they have almost zero oversight and zero accountability, because a lot of these are classified missions. Even if casualties do occur, it's never publicized. And obviously, this operation was a great success, but there were a million things that could have gone wrong. I mean, this could have been a disaster.
Yeah, but it wasn't. And so hear me out. Previously, before Iraq, the U.S. had started having success in these short operations, whether they were bombing or against Saddam in Kuwait. And suddenly all this like post-Cold War hesitation, post-Vietnam hesitation to use armed forces began to drain away because U.S. military missions seemed overwhelmingly successful. And so we became more willing to use our military to support things like regime change. Could this go to Trump's head?
No, because I think he still has such a huge part of his base. Because, I mean, remember, the polling's before this in terms of like going to war with Venezuela or any sort of operation was like at 25%.
But it did not stop him from saying we are going to run Venezuela. So he's not.
He likes the idea. He said we're going to like turn Gaza into a freaking casino resort area. It's bullshit. We're not going to run Venezuela.
But he, in his own mind, thinks that that's a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, he likes the idea because he envisions the oil companies instantly being able to generate huge amounts of cash that's going to pay for everything. And I'm sure he's fuzzy on the proxies or what it actually means to run a country. Although half of this is because he got traction initially because of his rightful skepticism around Iraq and what a giant disaster that was trying to run that country.
I agree. That's sort of where he first built up his base, and that his base is not thrilled with these things. But I think
right.
I think some of it.
So you think he's just like the hell with the base? I mean, I only if he's going to personally make money from this. But I don't see him personally making a huge amount. Is he going to make more than he's made? And because I mean, that's the other thing is Wall Street Journal came out with an article showing his net worth increase just over the last year.
Yeah,
he was like around like $2 billion before. He's now at like $6 billion.
Yeah, all those crypto deals.
Yeah. So I mean, is he gonna get rich off of Venice? More?
I don't know. But
it seems outside his space. He's not a big energy guy. He's real estate and crypto guy.
There's real estate deals to be made in Venezuela.
There are.
Too.
That's Cuba. That's the big play.
Yeah. Venezuela has beautiful oceanfront property.
Cuba's
too.
Closer. And it's all oceanfront property.
I just think Trump is kind of enchanted by all this internationalism that he's been, engaged in, wanting to be the peace person and now wanting to control Venezuela.
And he got the FIFA Peace Prize. I mean,
yes.
He has the World Cup coming.
My favorite tweet was how this undermines that Peace Prize. I think he's not really thinking about running for election again because he can't. And so he's thinking of his legacy and he sees it in terms of these international conflicts, whether he's solving them or using dramatic military power. I think this is in his head.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, which kind of fits with the personality that he gives zero damns about the party,
right,
about
so
the Republican Party, because this will tank them.
Yeah.
For sure. Because again, they were the losses in 2025 from the local and state elections. It was all because it was seen he wasn't focused on affordability. Mm-hmm. And they had maybe 1 week after these election results where his advisors guilted him into focusing on affordability. And he did it so reluctantly. But now I kind of get what you're saying because he gets the love. And naturally, this is where a president is least constrained is around foreign policy. That's what we've always said. We've always been you should vote based on foreign policy because that's where the president has power. Trump's kind of expanded that power domestically. But even in this expanded power domestically, he still has all the pains of the federalist system, so individual states, and then the pains of the judicial system, courts still blocking so many of his actions. But foreign policy is wide open. So I get what you're saying. So you think he's fallen in love with U.S. foreign policy and his ability to wield the might of the American military to do what he wants.
I absolutely think so.
Okay, so that raises maybe the final question is, what are the implications outside of Venezuela? Both for, we talked about Cuba. Apparently, Stephen Miller's wife tweeted a picture of Greenland that had a big American flag on it. That was not well received by Denmark or Greenland. No. So is that next? Should we expect, further pressure on the kind of the countries that emerged as the initial focus of MAGA imperialism?
That is a good follow-up question. I want to say no, that we're not going to be sending the military.
To take Greenland?
Although if it was just Trump, up to Trump, and there was no handlers at all,
yeah,
I'm not so sure that he wouldn't. If he was a dictatorship or something, that he wouldn't send the military.
It's a big, because at least here they're able to have the facade of the 2020 Southern District of New York warrant around drug charges for this intervention with Maduro, and then the precedents with Noriega. Greenland, a democratic nation, is just a even more naked power grab.
Yeah. No, I don't. I saw that happening, those exchanges happening, and I think Trump would like for that to happen, but I don't see any realistic chances. The next operation is definitely Cuba. We don't have drug charges against Cuba.
I think they're going to link it to somehow, because Cuba is so embedded within Venezuela, that they're somehow going to tie somebody in Cuba to the drug-related activities and then charge the leader. Yeah, they don't have to have... They barely need a reason, but they'll come up with some sort of legal facade for
you're
it.
Right, because the whole thing about Cuba is we know they're going to take Cuba out, but right now they don't have any legal justification.
Yep. Okay, final question. What's this mean for... How does Russia and China receive this message of what just happened?
I think from China's perspective, there's two ways of looking at this. On one hand, that Trump doesn't seem that constrained or bothered by using military force, and American military might is still really powerful. On the other hand, they could be focusing on the Donroe, what did he call it? Not the Monroe Doctrine, but the
The Donroe Doctrine?
Donroe Doctrine.
Okay.
And just see that the U.S. is willing to militarily engage in Latin America, but that means they're less likely to engage in Asia. So people have really focused on the latter interpretation. Mm-hmm. But if I was China, I would think about the first interpretation too, that he's not hesitant to use the military.
Yeah, but it's a big difference doing an operation that's pretty close to the U.S. versus that sort of operation anywhere near China.
Well, we're not going to do that sort of operation. But I think if I was China, thinking about how far I want to push things with Taiwan, that I might not want to count out that Trump would use the American military.
Maybe. I think it's an interesting data point. And I think the most impressive thing around it, and the thing that the Chinese military has yet to prove, is the coordination. And again, that's something that the general, I keep calling him Raising Cane, but I'm just doing his nickname because I don't know. I'm not going to look it up. General Cane. Dean Cain. General Cain's breakdown was just that level of coordination with all the branches of the military, with the CIA, with Space Force, around NSA, the cyber intelligence, the NSA, is something China has yet to prove. Because it does take that level of extraordinary coordination and data, moving seamlessly and perfect execution for that sort of operation. And China would have to do something similar to be successful within Taiwan. So does it question their own ability to be able to pull something off? If China, what China lacks that the U.S. has always had, maybe with Latin America, you kind of mentioned like how U.S. built its confidence back up after Vietnam by doing these small little operations. But China doesn't have Europe, like a practice place,
right? It doesn't.
Go. They couldn't do like a border skirmish with Vietnam again. It'd be because taking on Vietnam is a major military.
They have a lot of interest in Vietnam too.
Yeah. They aren't going to go. They obviously have border issues with India, border issues with Russia, but that's not the sort of proxy to go after. No. So they would have to go into Taiwan carrying out an operation 10 times more complicated than kind of what the U.S. just executed, and do it pretty close to perfectly. So now I'm talking myself out of like why China would want to take this risk.
Yesterday you were telling me China's going to take this as an obvious sign to attack Taiwan in 2027. I don't think so. I think, to what you're saying, the number one advantage the U.S. has is its experience in operations that require this level of coordination. And China has never, that's just in general kind of a struggle for China. And they never have an opportunity to, like you said, do like practice runs or anything. Yeah,
beyond kind of the drills that they just conducted.
So the U.S. has some disadvantages against China, just the long distance and maybe our exquisite systems being fewer than their more commercial, lower price sort of drones and things. But our biggest is the tyranny of distance and maybe our lack of an industrial base that can quickly make more weapons. But we by far, I think it's more important than the technology that we have is our experience that just can't be replicated in any other way.
In any sort of like drill.
Like I said, if I was China, I see like what you were telling me yesterday, that all this, we had pulled troops from the Asia Pacific area, Middle East, to carry out these operations. But on one hand, yeah, it shows we're serious about our Donroe Doctrine, but it also, I think, spells that Trump is not afraid to use military force.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting, both with Russia and China, and we saw this in Iran as well, they're not willing to stick their necks out for their proxies. Yeah. These are not like true allies in any sense. Yeah. I mean, they're not willing to take any risk around this.
So for Russia, their perspective, it can't be great that Venezuela's out of play, particularly Cuba, but it won't change their policy in any way. I don't see. It just allies that they have elsewhere in the world, it decreases those.
Yeah. And they were already such a shrunken, it's only Putin where they've gotten some small clawing back of kind of the Soviet sphere of influence. And they were able to get some of Africa back, but they in turn lost the Middle East. I mean, their foothold within the Middle East is gone, and potentially, whatever sort of presence in South America and Latin America is also gone. But yeah, I always find it interesting that for these talks of, a multipolar world, Soviet Union intervened and backed its proxies during the Cold War, without a doubt. I mean, that's why we led the Korea War into Vietnam. But we don't see that here.
It's true. That's a good thing, I think.
So are we truly in a multipolar world, or is it still America's?
I've never argued that we're truly in a multipolar world.
A lot of people do.
I know people do. But going back to my definition of a superpower, which you disagreed with, it's the ability to seriously influence beyond your own regional borders. And I think China's influence is still most pronounced in regional borders. It's hard to say because economically they're very powerful in Africa and Latin America. But if you're talking about hard power, and I'm not saying that's the only way to talk about it, but if you are talking about it in hard power, then China is very constrained to the Asian region.
Yeah, and maybe, that just, you talk about the definition of superpower, maybe that is a good, your willingness to back proxies and allies outside your region as a sign of being a superpower, of which then only the Soviet Union, U.S. have ever been.
I think there's a lot of people that would argue that, yes.
Superpowers, yeah. So until China is willing to commit hard power outside of Asia, or even inside of Asia to its allies against the United States and its proxies, then it's not truly a superpower.
I guess, it uses its military in the South China Sea to stir up trouble and, drills along Taiwan and sort of threatening those areas. But it's certainly no military presence outside of that area.
Yeah, because it abandoned, Iran particularly seems to be on the verge of something major as well, given the protest. But yeah, no, China and Russia are missing in action.
Absolutely. And China had bought a lot in Venezuela. It didn't get anything out of it, but it had bought a lot in Venezuela.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a significant amount of debt owed to China by Venezuela.
Significant.
I'm thinking that's not getting paid now.
No, I think not. So I guess in my conclusion, I would say, yay, Maduro's out. That's a positive thing. Yay, American military. But the two things I would caution, one, yay, Maduro, but that should come with supporting the democratic leaders of Venezuela. That's important to me if we're trying to justify our actions. The fact that we're not doing that is troubling. And it's always going to be, especially if we do Cuba, which we both think will happen, it's a little troubling to just have the U.S. then come in and take out whatever leaders it doesn't like. I think that's not a good trend.
Yeah, it's not a good trend. I think it creates the conditions of nations that are capable of acquiring or building their own nuclear weapon, be more encouraged to do so.
Absolutely.
U.S. does not pull these things off with ones with nuclear arms.
Absolutely. Well, you have anything else?
No, I think that's good.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this special bonus episode of Kellogg's Global Politics. You can visit our website at www.kellogg'sglobalpolitics.com and follow us on X at Global Kellogg or me at AR Kellogg.
You can also reach us by email, Anita at kellogg'sglobalpolitics.com and Ryan at kellogg'sglobalpolitics.com. As always, please see the show notes for the articles we did mention in the episode.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.